I showed up unannounced to see my daughter. She was lying on the floor by the door, wearing tattered, worn-out clothes. Her husband wiped his shoes on her and told the guests, "She's our insane maid." I didn't scream. I just stepped forward and everyone froze. Because Victor was counting money. It was payday, as his mother had taught him back then. For months, Anna had avoided answering his calls. At first, she didn't answer the phone. Then, she sent short messages. "I'm busy. I'll call you later." Then, she stopped responding altogether. Victor wrote emails, but the responses became increasingly brief and formal until they ceased completely. He called the house landline, but a polite female voice answered, informing him that Anna was resting and couldn't take calls. After 3 weeks, Victor sent one last message to his daughter. "Dad, help me." He called immediately, but the number was out of service. Since then, the phone had remained silent. And now he was here, unannounced, uninvited. A 60-year-old retired military surgeon who in his life had seen many things. But he had never felt a cold in his chest like the one he felt now. Looking at this beautiful White House, Victor pulled on his jacket collar and walked down the tiled path. With each step, the cold in his chest intensified, though he couldn't explain why. Everything looked normal. A well-kept garden behind the fence, expensive cars in the driveway, lights in the first-floor windows, sounds of music and laughter escaping from somewhere inside. Next to the gate was a security booth, but it was empty. Victor pressed the doorbell and waited. No one responded. He pressed again, longer this time. Silence again. Then he pushed the small door adjacent to the main gate, expecting it to be locked, but it gave way easily. Victor entered and walked up the driveway toward the main entrance. Now he could hear the music more clearly. Some kind of jazz, the voices of many people. Clearly, there was a party at the house. Climbing onto the porch, he rang the doorbell and waited. He rang again. No one opened the door, even though noise could be heard behind it. Victor went around the house to the right, walking along the wall. The music got louder. Rounding the corner, Victor discovered a small door, clearly a service door intended for staff. He pushed it, and it turned out to be unlocked. He entered a narrow hallway with white walls that smelled of cleaning products. A service corridor leading to the mansion's main rooms. Victor walked down it, opened another door, and found himself in the mansion's vestibule. And then he saw his daughter, Anna. Anna was lying on the floor by the front door, directly on the decorative carpet that said, "Welcome," wearing a faded gray t-shirt and sweatpants with holes in the knees. Her hair, once abundant and vibrant, hung in tangled, greasy strands. She didn't move, just stared at the ceiling with empty eyes, as if she didn't see or hear anything around her. The guests passed by her as if she were furniture. Some stepped over her legs. Others walked around her without looking down. And then from the living room came a well-built man in a perfectly tailored gray suit. Victor recognized him. Adrian, Anna's husband, the son-in-law he had only seen at the wedding, and who had then made the impression of being an educated and self-confident person. Adrian approached the door without looking down, stepped directly on Anna, on her abdomen, and as if wiping the soles of his patent leather shoes, he rubbed first one, then the other, as if she weren't a person, but simply an entryway mat. He raised his voice to the guests gathered in the vestibule. "Don't worry, this is our crazy servant. The poor thing isn't well in the head, but we take care of her. It's our way of doing charity." Some guests laughed. Others shook their heads with false compassion. No one protested. Victor stood in the entrance of the service hallway, and the world around him reduced to the size of that scene. Anna's body on the floor, the shoes, the suit stepping on her abdomen, the laughter that sounded like the screech of glass on glass. He didn't scream. He didn't run to the people. With one step, just one step, he crossed the vestibule. And at that moment, somewhere in the living room, someone dropped a glass. The tinkling of crystal on the marble floor made everyone turn their heads. In the entrance to the living room stood a gray-haired man of about 65 years in an impeccable dark suit. The champagne glass lay at his feet, and a golden puddle spread across the floor. But he didn't notice. He was looking at Victor as if he had seen the dead rise from the grave. Victor also recognized him. Those eyes he had seen 20 years ago when they opened after a terrible operation. Gerardo, Anna's grandfather. Back then, he was a young entrepreneur who had suffered a terrible accident during a mountain race. Ruptured spleen, liver damage, multiple internal hemorrhages. Any surgeon would have declared the case hopeless, saying there was no hope. Victor operated for 4 hours straight, literally assembling the man piece by piece. When Gerardo regained consciousness, he cried and repeated, "I will return the favor. Whatever it costs, I am indebted to you for the rest of my life." Now, this man stood in the middle of the party and looked at Victor with eyes full of terror. Victor pulled back his shoulders. His voice trembled. "Adrian." Adrian raised his head and listened. He heard the name and looked at his father-in-law. For a second, his face went blank, and in his eyes flashed something sharp and dangerous, like the blade of a hidden knife. But then his expression changed as if someone had flipped a switch, and Adrian smiled broadly. "Papa," he exclaimed, moving away from Anna's body and heading toward Victor with open arms. "My God, what a surprise. What an incredible surprise. Why didn't you let us know? I would have received you, as you deserve." Victor didn't respond to the hug. He looked past his son-in-law at his daughter, lying on the floor. Anna slowly raised her head and looked at him. In her eyes, there was no recognition, only emptiness and something resembling fear. "Anna," Victor said, and his voice didn't sound right. She blinked once, twice. Her lips moved. "Papa." Her voice was so hoarse, he barely heard her. "Papa, are you alive?" Adrian turned to the guests, still smiling. "Friends, excuse this little spectacle. My wife and her father haven't seen each other in a long time." She got emotional. You know how women are so emotional. He gave a signal to a guard at the door, and the guard began gently guiding the guests back to the living room. People left, looking back with curiosity, whispering among themselves. Gerardo didn't move from his spot. He remained standing, looking at Victor, and in his gaze was something resembling supplication. Adrian approached Anna and helped her up. She moved like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, her arms hanging limply at her sides. And Victor saw the marks on the inside of her elbows. Small, dark marks from injections. "Many marks, darling. Look who came." Adrian murmured, holding his wife by the waist. "Your papa. Isn't it wonderful?" Anna looked at Victor, and slowly, very slowly, something alive appeared in her eyes. Recognition, and with it, fear. Fear so intense that she trembled with her whole body. "You're alive," she repeated. "He told me you had died. He showed me the newspaper. An obituary." "What?" Victor took a step toward her. "What obituary?" "Anna, what are you talking about?" Adrian laughed. And that laugh sounded absolutely natural, absolutely carefree. "My poor girl. You see, Papa, how she confuses things. It's the illness. The latest delusions of delirium. The doctors diagnosed drug-induced schizophrenia. Yes, it's hard for me to talk about this, but Anna became addicted to various harmful substances." He shook his head with false sadness. "I did everything possible to help her, the doctors, the clinics. But even now, mentally, there hasn't been much progress." Victor looked into his son-in-law's eyes. 30 years of surgical practice had taught him to see lies, to see fear hidden behind bravado, to see calculation behind smiles. "I want to talk to my daughter alone," he said. Of course, of course." Adrian nodded. "But first, let's get you settled. We have enough guest rooms. You must be tired from the trip, and Anna should rest now. She needs to take her medication. I want to talk to her now. Papa, please." Adrian's voice became sharper, like a whip. "Don't make a scene in front of the guests. This party is extremely important. My business depends on them. Let's discuss everything calmly as a family. I'll take Anna upstairs, and then you and I will talk. Man to man." "Agreed." He didn't wait for an answer. He took Anna by the elbow and led her away. She walked behind him obediently, like a child. Only once did she look back at her father, and in her gaze was so much longing that Victor's hope was cut short. He wanted to follow them, to rush to the stairs, and then two burly men in black suits appeared in front of him, as if they had sprouted from the floor. Security. "Excuse me, sir," one of them said politely, but firmly. "The master asks that you wait for him in his office." Victor could have tried to pass, could have made a scandal, but he understood that wouldn't help anything. Two guards against a 60-year-old man. Even if he managed to break through, then what? Adrian would call the police, and formally he would be right. Trespassing, assault. He needed information. He needed a plan. "All right," Victor said. "Where is the office?" They led him through the vestibule, past the living room where the party continued as if nothing had happened, down a hallway to the back of the house. The office turned out to be a spacious room with oak-paneled walls, a massive leather desk, and glass-fronted bookcases containing books that clearly no one had ever read, spines too even, bindings too identical. The guards remained outside the door. Victor approached the window and looked out at the dark garden. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the rage he was containing with all his strength. The deliberate humiliation of Anna, Adrian's performance of concern for our crazy servant, and the immediate dismissal of Victor's presence are all hallmarks of narcissistic abuse and gaslighting. Adrian actively disorients and devalues Anna, creating a false reality where she is mentally ill and addicted, while simultaneously controlling her and isolating her from support systems like her father. Victor's military intelligence background allows him to recognize these patterns and see through the facade, marking his transition from a concerned father to a determined rescuer. This realization is amplified by the unexpected recognition and silent plea from Gerardo, who, Victor instantly perceives, is also trapped in Adrian's web. The door opened, and Gerardo entered. He looked 20 years older than when Victor had seen him in the vestibule. He closed the door behind him and stood there without daring to come closer. "I didn't know," he began, and his voice trembled. "I didn't know. I swear by everything I hold dear. I didn't know." Didn't know what? Victor didn't turn from the window. What he was doing to her. Gerardo leaned against the door as if his legs refused to support him. "When I introduced them, I thought she would be happy. I gave my blessing. It's my sin. Now I see." Now, Victor turned and looked at the man whose life he had saved 20 years ago. "Tell me," he said, "everything. From the beginning." Gerardo lowered himself into a chair, as if his legs refused to support him. "It was 3 years ago," he began. "I was at a charity gala. Adrian was also there. He's the son of an old business partner. We started talking. He mentioned he was looking for a wife. I remembered Anna. She was working at a publishing house then. I had seen her a couple of times at presentations. Intelligent, beautiful, modest, the perfect wife for a man of his circle." He fell silent, rubbing his forehead. "I introduced them. I organized a meeting at a reception. They liked each other. 6 months later, they were married. This house was a wedding gift from me." He raised his eyes and looked at Victor. I saw how happily he looked at her. She was truly in love. He gave me gifts and thanked me for introducing him to his happiness. "When did it start?" Victor asked. "I went to Europe for 6 months' business. When I returned, I started hearing rumors that the young wife of Adrian was ill, that she had problems with drugs, that he was taking her. From doctor to doctor. I wanted to visit, but Adrian always found an excuse to refuse. That Anna was in quarantine. That she wasn't feeling well. That she had gone for treatment." Gerardo raised his eyes to Victor. "And I believed him. And I understood. I understood that he was doing to her the same thing he had done to the others." Victor felt the cold and his chest turn to ice. "What others?" Gerardo opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment the door burst open, and Adrian entered. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold and attentive as those of someone evaluating an opponent. "Ignacio," he said with reproach. "Leaving the guests for a private conversation is not very polite." Gerardo stood up, and Victor saw how pale he had become. Fear. This influential man was afraid of a 35-year-old man. "I just wanted," Gerardo began. I understand. Adrian interrupted him politely. You wanted to present your respects to my wife's father. Very commendable. Now, please return to the guests. I need to talk to my father-in-law alone. Gerald looked at Victor. In his gaze was something resembling an apology. A warning. We'll see each other again, he said in a low voice and left. Adrian closed the door behind him and turned to Victor. The smile had disappeared from his face, like fog blown away. Well, he said, approaching the desk and sitting in the owner's chair. Let's talk, man. Adrian leaned back in the chair and crossed his arms over his chest, watching Victor with the expression of someone who has the situation completely under control. On his face, not a trace remained of the amiable smile he had shown the guests. Now it was the face of a predator who had cornered his prey and was enjoying its helplessness. Please sit. He indicated a chair in front of the desk. The conversation will be long. Victor didn't sit. He remained standing by the window with his arms crossed, looking at his son-in-law as he used to look at young officers who tried to lie to him. That look made people sweat and stammer. But Adrian showed no visible signs of discomfort. He just shrugged. As you wish. If you're more comfortable standing, stand. Though at your age, you should take care of your legs. What's happening with her? Victor wasn't asking. He was demanding an answer. Adrian sighed with the air of someone who has to explain the obvious to an unintelligent interlocutor. He opened a desk drawer and took out a folder, placing it in front of him. I was hoping we wouldn't come to this, he said. I was hoping you would accept the situation quietly, without unnecessary questions. But since you insist. He opened the folder and turned it so Victor could see its contents. Medical reports on official paper. Prescriptions, photographs. Anna is ill, Adrian pronounced, with a sadness that was too well rehearsed in his voice. Schizoaffective disorder provoked by abuse of psychoactive substances. In simple words, she became addicted to drugs 3 months after our wedding. First cocaine, then something stronger. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. The psychosis started. Hallucinations, episodes of aggression. He took a photograph from the folder and extended it to Victor. The woman in the image looked like Anna, but it was difficult to recognize her. Disheveled hair, glazed eyes, mouth deformed by a scream. She was standing in the corner of some room, clutching a knife to her chest. This was 8 months ago, Adrian said. She tried to stab me. She said I was poisoning her food, that I wanted to kill her. Classic paranoid delirium. Victor took the photograph and examined it carefully. His surgeon's trained eye noticed details an ordinary person would have missed. Dilated pupils, unnatural pallor of the skin. Body position characteristic of someone fighting loss of coordination. This didn't look like cocaine psychosis. This looked like poisoning. I took her to the best specialists, Adrian continued. A clinic in Switzerland, professors from Germany. Everyone says the same thing. Irreversible changes in the psyche. She will never be the same again. He took more documents from the folder, medical reports with seals and signatures. I could have committed her to a closed psychiatric clinic. Adrian's voice softened, becoming more understanding. I had every right. But I love Anna, Victor, despite everything. That's why I keep her at home. I provide her with care, pay for treatment. It costs me a lot of money and nerves, but I don't give up. Victor put the photographs on the desk. Why is she lying on the floor by the door? He asked in a calm voice. It's part of her disorder. Adrian spread his hands. Sometimes she refuses to get up from the floor for hours. Sometimes she undresses completely and runs around the house. Sometimes she screams that she's being held hostage by aliens. The doctors call them catatonic episodes. And you wiping your feet on her. Adrian was silent for a second, and Victor saw how something flashed in his eyes. Anger, irritation, but it disappeared immediately, replaced by an expression of patient compassion. I didn't even notice. She was lying there, he said. It's so terrible that I've gotten used to it. My own wife lying on the floor. And I'm so accustomed that I walk past without looking. That's how we've sunk. I live with this every day." He shook his head, performing weariness and despair so convincingly that an unprepared person would have believed him without a doubt. "Listen, Victor." Adrian leaned forward, and his voice became almost confidential. "I understand it's difficult for you to accept this. She's your daughter. You remember her differently, healthy and happy. But the reality is what it is. Anna is ill. Seriously, possibly incurably ill. I do everything in my power to ease her suffering." Victor remained silent, processing what he had heard. 30 years as a surgeon had taught him to listen not just to words, but also to the pauses between them. He had learned to notice how a person breathes when they tell the truth, and how when they lie. Adrian was lying. Victor was as sure of this as of his own name. But words alone were not enough. He needed evidence. "She said you told her I had died," Victor pronounced. "That you showed her an obituary." Adrian sighed again, this time with a touch of condescension. "And you believed her? A woman who yesterday claimed the neighbor's cat speaks Vietnamese to her." He shook his head. "Victor, I understand a father's feelings, but let's be realistic. Anna can't distinguish reality from her hallucinations. There might have been an obituary in a magazine about some stranger, and she decided it was you. Or she simply invented the whole story." He leaned back in his chair and looked at Victor with a different expression now, evaluating and calculating. "Let's speak frankly," he said. "I see what you think of me. I saw it in your eyes when you entered. You think I'm a monster who abuses Anna, but the truth is I'm the only person who takes care of her." He stood and approached a bar in the corner of the office, poured whiskey into a heavy crystal glass. "Where were you the last year and a half?" he asked without turning around. "She tried to contact you, tried to call, and you simply resigned yourself. You didn't come, didn't check. You know why? Because it was more comfortable for you to think she was happy. More comfortable not to know the truth." Victor felt those words hit their mark because it was the truth. Really, he had convinced himself that Anna's silence meant she was busy, not in trouble. He had convinced himself that a rich husband would take better care of her than he himself ever could. "But I was by her side," Adrian continued with the glass in his hand. "Every day, every night, when she screamed, when she didn't recognize me and called me by other people's names, when she tried to throw herself out the window, I went through all of it. I begged her to live. I convinced myself not to give up." He took a sip of whiskey and looked Victor straight in the eyes. "Accusations of trying to harm herself. Of that, you're not guilty. You ran away when everything started. Where were you when it was hard? Why didn't you answer when she tried to reach you? Because she didn't matter to you. Because it was easier not to know." Victor clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. He wanted to cross the room and break this man's face. But his surgeon's mind, trained in years of working in extreme conditions, remained cold and calculating. Adrian was provoking him, waiting for him to lose control, to give him a reason to call security, to make Victor look like an unstable aggressor. "I read my wife's diaries," Victor said in a voice so low it was almost a whisper. "After her death, 30 years of notes about how unhappy she was, about how I controlled her, about how I killed her slowly with my care." He looked Adrian straight in the eyes. "So, don't lecture me. I know what it's like to destroy the person you love in the name of love. I know what it's like when care becomes a cage. And I see myself in you, Adrian. I see the monster I was. And I see how you use that. How you found in Anna a victim who was prepared from childhood to accept control as love." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. But he quickly recovered. "If you understand this," he said slowly, "then you should understand. I'm doing what's best for her. I'm protecting her from herself. You're poisoning her." Victor spoke the words like a sentence. "With the same drugs you used to poison your previous wives." Silence fell in the office, broken only by the distant sounds of the party. Adrian stood motionless with the glass in his hand, and his face remained absolutely calm. But his pupils narrowed, and the muscles on his neck tensed. "That's quite an accusation," he said finally. Based on what? On the delusions of a schizophrenic? On paranoia? Based on medical knowledge, Victor responded. I've seen drug poisoning. I know what it looks like. And Anna shows all the signs of systematic administration of substances that destroy will and consciousness. Adrian put down the glass and approached Victor. Now there was no smile on his face, no pretense, just cold calculation. Even if that were true, he said quietly, who would believe you? An old retired surgeon against me? I have doctors, lawyers, witnesses. I have medical reports signed by the best specialists. And what do you have? The word of a woman the court has declared incompetent. He moved even closer, and his voice became almost a whisper. Do you want to fight me?
Try.
Call the police. Demand an investigation. I have connections at every level. My godfather is a Supreme Court judge. How do you think this will end for you? Victor looked into the eyes of this man who had destroyed his daughter and felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Not anger, not hatred, but absolute certainty. I'll take her away from here, he said. No, you won't, Adrian smiled. One call, and you'll be arrested. Breaking and entering. Assault in my own home. A criminal case. And while you're dealing with that, I'll commit Anna to a closed psychiatric facility. I have all the necessary documents, medical reports, doctor testimonies. The court will declare her incompetent, and you will never see her again. Ever. He returned to the desk and pressed a button. The guards entered the room. Escort Mr. Mitchell out, Adrian ordered. And make sure he doesn't return. The guards took Victor by the elbows. He didn't resist. Looked at Adrian one last time. This isn't over, he said. Oh, but it is. Adrian smiled. Completely and irreversibly over. Victor was escorted to the main entrance. The guards released him on the porch. Below, in the driveway, a taxi was already waiting. Victor descended the steps, got into the car, and gave the address of the train station. The taxi started, and the mansion began to shrink in the rear window. But Victor wasn't looking back. He was looking at the business card he still held in his hand. On the back of the card, below the printed phone number, someone had written by hand a few words. Gerardo. Today, Riverside Cafe. I'll be waiting. The handwriting was unknown. Someone at the party, someone who had seen what happened. Victor put the card in his pocket and gave the driver a new address. The meeting with Gerardo. The house on Riverside Street turned out to be an old mansion wedged between modern office buildings, like a fragment of the past century that the city had forgotten to demolish. The taxi stopped in front of the iron gates, rusted, behind which could be seen an unkempt garden with bare trees and cracked stone paths. Victor paid and got out, feeling how the night cold crept under his coat. The gates were ajar, as if waiting for him. He walked down the path to the massive wooden door, and before he could knock, it opened. In the doorway stood Gerardo, without a jacket, with his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in several days and didn't plan to sleep for several more. Come in, he said in a low voice and stepped aside to let him pass. The house smelled of wood and old books. Gerardo led him down a dark hallway to a living room where a fireplace was burning. 2 armchairs were oriented toward the fire. On the small table between them, a carafe of cognac and 2 glasses were prepared. Sit down. Gerardo pointed to one of the armchairs. The conversation will be long. Victor sat, but refused the cognac. Gerardo poured himself a drink, took a large gulp, and sank into the armchair opposite. For several minutes, he remained silent, looking at the fire. Then Gerardo spoke. My wife was at the table preparing for the funeral, and then you appeared. For hours on the operating table, 43 sutures, 7 liters of blood from donors. He looked at the cognac, reflecting the flames. When I woke up, the first thing I said was a promise that I would return the favor, whatever it cost at any time. I asked her to write it down, because I repeated it every day for all these years. Then return it, Victor said. Tell me everything. Gerardo lowered the glass and held his hands in front of his face, as if about to confess something terrible. I should start with myself, he said. With my own sin, because without that, you won't understand Adrian.
He's my sin.
I created that monster. He put down the glass and wrung his hands in front of him. Pablo Dominguez was my business partner. We started together in the 90s, when money flowed in ways it's better not to remember. Pablo was ruthless, but I considered him a friend. When Adrian was 15, Pablo asked me to be his godfather,
To help the boy.
to teach him. He looked at the fire. Adrian grew up smart. At 21, he was already a banker. At 23, he married a beautiful girl. Her name was Marina, 20 years old, sweet eyes, fresh graduate from university. Gerardo fell silent for a long moment. They got married, he continued. Finally, a year later, Marina ended up in a psychiatric clinic in Switzerland. Official diagnosis: acute psychosis from drug addiction. Her parents tried to get her out of there, but Adrian managed to have her declared incompetent. Now he was her legal guardian. All her inheritance, which was not small, passed under his control. He leaned back heavily in his chair, supporting himself on the armrests. The second wife was Olga. She was a widow of an industrialist, older than Adrian by 15 years, a rich woman. They were married for 6 months. Then she died from an overdose of sleeping pills. The investigation was closed in 3 weeks. Suicide due to depression. They said Adrian inherited everything. And you kept quiet. Victor's voice was hoarse. You knew all this. Pablo was still alive then. Gerardo raised his hands in a gesture of defense. He covered for his son.
And I didn't want to see. Didn't want to believe.
Adrian was so charming, so convincing. He cried at Olga's funeral with real tears. He cried on my shoulder, and I consoled him. He covered his face with his hands. When he asked me to introduce him to Anna, I was happy to help. I thought I was doing something good, uniting two good people. Anna was so luminous, so full of life. I thought she would change him. When did you understand the truth? Victor asked. 3 months ago. As Gerardo uncovered his face. Pablo was dying of cancer. He was in the hospital. He was alone and he started talking, confessing as the dying sometimes do. He told me about Marina, about Olga, about how Adrian paid doctors for false diagnoses, about how he bribed investigators and judges. He broke off, rubbing his forehead. He was proud of it. Do you understand? Proud of the son he had raised. Victor felt the cold spread down his spine. Why didn't you go to the police? Gerardo let out a bitter laugh. With what? The delirious ramblings of a dying man? No evidence. Adrian by then had become too influential, too protected. His connections reached offices at the highest levels. He lowered his voice. I was afraid, Victor. Afraid for myself and for my family. I have children, grandchildren. I was afraid. Victor stood and walked to the window. Outside, the garden drowned in darkness. The bare branches of trees scratching the sky like dead fingers. He said he sees vulnerabilities, he pronounced, turning around. That he saw them in Anna and in me. Gerardo kept silent before answering. I don't know the details, but Adrian once let slip that Anna was the perfect victim. He said she had always sought someone to control her, that she had it in her blood. Victor closed his eyes. Adrian's words in the office echoed again in his head. About Lydia, about how she had obeyed her husband, about how he had found in Anna something familiar. He told me the same, Victor said in a low voice. He said she was like me, that I trained her to accept control as love. Gerardo looked at him with a strange expression. Is it true? He asked cautiously. Victor remained silent for a long time. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting trembling shadows on the walls. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I never hit my wife. Never raised my voice. On paper, I was the perfect husband. A respected surgeon, good salary, didn't drink, didn't cheat with other women. Everyone told Lydia how fortunate she was. He returned to the armchair and sat, looking at his hands. But I controlled every one of her steps. Decided what she would wear, what she would eat, where she would go, who she would be friends with. She wanted to work. I said, no, your place is at home. She wanted to visit her sister. I said, "No, stay here." She wanted to have another child. I said, "No, one is enough." He clenched his fists. I did it with love, with care. I knew better. I was more intelligent, more experienced, stronger. She should obey, because I knew what was best for her. That's what I thought. That's how I justified it. What happened to her? Gerardo asked in a low voice. She got sick at 40. The doctor said it was her heart. But I'm a doctor myself. I know her heart had nothing to do with it.
She simply stopped wanting to live. Stopped eating.
Stopped sleeping. She was fading before my eyes, and I couldn't understand.
Didn't want to see.
Victor raised his head. She died at 52. In our bedroom, in our bed. I came home from work and found her. She was smiling. For the first time in many years, she was smiling. The silence in the room was interrupted only by the crackling of the fire. Anna didn't cry at the funeral, Victor continued. I thought she was too shocked, but then I understood. It wasn't grief, it was relief. Her mother had been freed, and Anna was happy for her. He looked at Gerardo with a direct gaze. After Mother's death, I found her diaries. 30 years of notes, each day, thousands of pages, about how unhappy she was, about how I had dominated her, about how she hated her life, about how she dreamed of escaping but had nowhere to go, about how she prayed for death. His voice broke. I read it all, every word, and I understood that I had been killing her all those years, slowly, imperceptibly, with love in my heart. I killed her without even realizing it. Gerardo extended the glass of cognac. This time, Victor took it and drank it all in one gulp. Adrian is right about one thing, Victor said. Anna grew up in a house where love meant control, where care meant submission. She didn't know anything else. When she met him, she recognized something familiar. She felt at home. That doesn't excuse what he's doing to her, Gerardo said. I know, Victor responded. But it makes me responsible for her being defenseless. I taught her to accept violence as love. I created the victim, he found. He stood, and in his eyes was a new determination. But I can still fix everything. I can't give back the years I took from Lydia. I can't undo what I taught Anna, but I can get her out of there. I can give her a chance at a different life.
How?
Gerardo asked. He has money, connections, lawyers. You have nothing. I have you, Victor said. You know people, you know where to look. I have my medical knowledge. I know what he's doing to her. And I have something he doesn't have. What? Nothing to lose. Gerardo looked at him for a long moment, and something changed in his face. The fear that had been there gave way to something else. Perhaps shame, perhaps determination. All right, he said finally. I'll help. But understand what we're up against. If we lose, Adrian will destroy us both, and Anna will be taken to a place she'll never return from. If we don't try, Victor responded, Anna will never return anyway. Gerardo nodded and pulled out his phone. I have a contact in the prosecutor's office, Gerardo said. Someone who owes me a favor. I'll see if I can get them to look at the case quietly, as far as possible. We need evidence, Victor said. Testimony from witnesses, recordings, video surveillance cameras. There are cameras in the house, but only Adrian has access to them, Gardo said. The service staff is intimidated. They won't talk. The doctors who prescribe her medication are bought. It seems hopeless. There must be someone, Victor insisted. Someone who knows what's happening and can't live with it. Yardo remained thoughtful. There is a maid, domestic help. Her name is Sophia. She's worked there from the beginning, from the first wife. I've seen how she looks at Adrian as if she wants to say something, but she's afraid. Can you contact her? I'll try, but it's dangerous. If Adrian finds out, he'll take revenge. Tell her I'm a doctor, Victor said. Tell her I can help Anna. Tell her this is the only chance. Gerardo nodded. I'll call you tomorrow afternoon. Stay in the city, but don't go near the mansion. Let Adrian think you've left. Victor extended his hand. Gerardo shook it, and in that handshake was more than a formal agreement. It was the redemption of a 20-year-old debt. Thank you, Victor said. Don't thank me, Gerardo responded. We haven't won yet, and we might not succeed. We will succeed, Victor said. We have no other choice. He went out into the cold night and walked down the street, looking for a taxi. In his head echoed the words from Lydia's diaries that he remembered by heart, even though he wished he could forget them. Today he decided again what I would wear. I couldn't say anything. I can only write here. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of myself. Sometimes I think if he loves me. I wonder when this will end. And I'm afraid of the answer. 20 years ago, he had read those lines and cried. Cried from self-pity, from lack of understanding, from resentment at the wife who hadn't valued his care, his help. He cried again now, but for something different, from understanding, from shame, from the knowledge that he had made Lydia suffer, had made her the person she hated, and from determination not to allow history to repeat itself. Victor's confrontation with Adrian, revealing Adrian's pattern of marital abuse and murder, highlights the concept of psychological projection on Adrian's part, where he attributes his own manipulative and controlling behaviors onto Anna and Victor. Adrian's defense strategy involves gaslighting and discrediting Anna's mental state, a common tactic in abusive relationships. Victor's agonizing self-reflection about his own past controlling behavior with Lydia is a critical moment of moral reckoning, demonstrating his profound realization of how his own actions inadvertently created a blueprint for Anna's vulnerability, making his quest to save her an act of both love and profound self-redemption. This internal struggle is a powerful psychological anchor, explaining why he is uniquely positioned to understand Adrian's methods and committed to breaking the cycle. The hotel room was small and plain, with thin walls through which voices from neighbors and traffic noise from the street could be heard. Victor sat on the bed, looking at the phone in his hands, waiting. An entire day had passed since he left Gerardo's house. A whole day of inaction that was more difficult for him than any multi-hour surgery. He thought about Anna, about what was happening to her at that very moment while he sat here, about the drugs slowly destroying her mind, about the husband wiping his feet on her, calling her a servant, laughing in front of guests, about how each hour of delay could be the last. The phone rang at 7 o'clock in the evening, when it was already dark outside. The number was unknown. Victor? It was Gerardo's voice.
Tense.
I found Sophia. She agreed to meet, but only with you. She's afraid of me. Says I'm Adrian's friend. Where and when? Tonight at 9. She goes out to buy groceries every night at that time. Adrian only allows her to leave the house for shopping. The main city market, the vegetable stand. She'll be wearing a gray coat and a blue scarf.
Victor noted the address.
I'll be there. Wait. Gerardo hesitated. My contact in the prosecutor's office reviewed the case of the second wife, Olga. Officially, everything is clean. Suicide. No suspicious circumstances. But in the archived records, he found the statement of a domestic worker that wasn't included in the case materials. What statement? She said she saw Adrian enter his wife's room an hour before her death and saw him leave with a small vial in his hand. The investigator noted it, but someone crossed it out of the record. The investigator was transferred to another city a month later. Victor gripped the phone, so hard the plastic creaked. Is that enough to open a case? Probably not. The statement isn't certified. The witness retracted the next day and left. The case was closed. But if we add other evidence to this, the picture starts to form. What other evidence? That depends on what Sophia tells you, and whether you can get a blood sample from Anna. If they find traces of drugs that weren't officially prescribed to her, it will be the beginning of the end for Adrian. Victor hung up and began to prepare. In his travel bag, he had a medical kit he carried out of habit. A habit left over from military days. Syringes, needles, basic medications. He didn't know if he'd need them, but he felt he would. The taxi dropped him off on the main street in 20 minutes. The market was almost empty at this hour. Most vendors were already closing their stalls. Victor found the vegetable stand and waited, pretending to examine potatoes. Sophia appeared exactly at 9, a slight woman of about 50 with a tired face and cautious eyes. Gray coat, blue scarf, everything as Gerardo had described. She stopped at the next stand and began looking through tangerines, glancing sideways at Victor. He moved closer, as if buying onions, standing next to her. "I'm Anna's father," he said in a low voice. "You wanted to talk." Sophia shuddered. Though she'd been expecting these words, "Not here," she whispered. "Behind the stands, there's a passage, a courtyard. Go down first. I'll follow." Victor did as she said, passed between the stands, found the passage, and came out into a courtyard, squeezed between walls full of boxes, empty crates, and garbage bags. A minute later, Sophia appeared, looking around like a hunted animal. "I don't have much time," she said. "Talk, speak." Sophia leaned against the wall, and in her shoulders was weariness beyond measure. "I've worked in that house for 15 years, she began. "Since the first wife. Marina was a good girl, cheerful, kind. The first months after the wedding, she was happy. And then the changes began." "What changes?" "First small ones. She started forgetting words mid-conversation. Confused days of the week. Fell asleep in strange places, right during lunch, or on the sofa in the middle of the day. Adrian told guests she was exhausted. Told doctors she had sleep problems." Sophia swallowed. And then the psychosis began. She woke up at night and screamed that someone wanted to kill her, that she saw people hidden in the walls, that the food was poisoned. The doctors said it was paranoid psychosis. They started treating her, giving her pills, but it only got worse. "Did you see him give her those pills?" Sophia nodded. "Adrian personally. Every morning, every night. He'd say nobody should be trusted with this, that he took care of her." And she believed him. Until the end, she believed he wanted to help her. Victor felt a cold rage rising in him, but he restrained himself. He needed information, not emotions. What happened next? After a year, he committed her to a clinic. Adrian cried when he signed the papers. Said it broke his heart, but he had to think of her health. Everyone pitied him. Such a loving husband. Such a tragedy. Sophia made a grimace of disgust. And I saw how he smiled when the ambulance drove away. Saw how he invited friends that same evening and celebrated. Said the annoying work was done. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Sophia looked at him with bitterness. "Where?" "I'm an immigrant with fake documents, no papers, no rights. Adrian pays well and works with people like me who have nowhere to go. And besides, I thought I was imagining it, that it couldn't really be happening. I convinced myself that I was wrong." She shook her head. And then the second wife appeared. Olga, an intelligent, strong woman. I thought she'd change him. The first months were really different. He treated her with respect, showed tenderness. I thought maybe I was wrong about him. Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. But after 6 months, it started again. Pills, confusion, lost consciousness. She fell down the stairs twice. The doctor said it was age-related problems with coordination. Adrian was always there, always caring, always with a sad face. And then she died. Yes, sleeping pills. They said suicide. But I saw. Sophia stopped as if afraid to continue. "What did you see?" "I saw him enter her room that night, an hour before it happened. I was cleaning the hallway. He didn't know I was there. He came out with a vial in his hand, empty. I remember because it caught the light." "Did you tell this to the police?" "I tried. An investigator came. I told him everything. He wrote it down. But then another man came, not in uniform. He talked with Adrian in the office for a long time. When he left, Adrian called me and said, if I valued my life, I should forget what I saw. The next day, the investigator called me and said I had been mistaken, that I hadn't seen anything." She wiped tears from her face. "I was scared. I have children in Mexico. He said if I talked, they'd be found. I believed him." Victor felt his hands trembling, not from fear, but from the rage he was containing with all his might. "And now, Anna." "Now, Anna," Sophia repeated, and in her voice was such despair that Victor's heart ached. "She's the worst of all, because she's young. Because she could have had a whole life. Because every day I see her fading and I can't do anything. You can. Victor took her by the shoulders. You can help me save her right now. Sophia shook her head. He'll kill me. You don't understand. He'll kill me. If you do nothing, he'll kill Anna, Victor said firmly. Just like he killed Marina. Just like he killed Olga.
Can you live with that?
Can you go back to that house and watch another woman die? Sophia closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. Listen to me. He took her by the shoulders. I'm a doctor, a military surgeon with 30 years of experience. I can help Anna. I can remove the drugs from her system. But to do that, I need to get to her. You're the only person who can get me that access. He'll kill me, Sophia whispered. You don't understand. He'll kill me. If you do nothing, you're killing Anna, Victor said. Just like you killed Marina by staying silent. Just like you killed Olga.
Can you live with that?
Can you watch another woman die in that house? Sophia kept silent, and he saw how fear and conscience fought within her. Listen to me. He took her by the shoulders. I'm a doctor, military surgeon, 30 years of experience. I can help Anna. I can get the drugs out of her system. But for that, I need to get to her. You're the only person who can help me with that. He'll kill me, she whispered again. But her voice was less confident. No, he won't, Victor said with more confidence than he felt. Not if we do everything right. Not if we act fast. Tomorrow, Adrian will be arrested. The prosecutor's office is already gathering evidence. But for them to have a solid case, I need to get Anna's blood sample, proof of what he's giving her. And you're the only one who can let me into that house. Sophia opened her eyes and looked at him. In her gaze was still fear, but also something else. Hope, perhaps, or simply exhaustion from carrying this burden alone. At 2 a.m, she said finally, and her voice trembled. The guard changes at that time, 5 minutes when the grounds are unsupervised. The back door, I left unlocked for you, is the one the staff uses. Anna's room is on the 2nd floor. 3rd door on the right from the stairs. Thank you. Victor released her shoulders. You're saving her life. Or I'm condemning both of us to death. Sophia wiped her tears and took a phone from her pocket. Here's my number. If something goes wrong, don't come. Just call to warn me. She dictated the number and disappeared as silently as she had appeared, dissolving into the darkness between the stands. Victor stood alone in the courtyard among the boxes, empty crates, and the smell of rotting vegetables. He looked at his watch. 9:30 until 2 a.m. More than 4 hours remained. Time to prepare. He returned to the hotel and laid out the contents of his medical kit on the bed. Syringes, vials, bandages, a bottle of saline solution, a packet of activated charcoal, and most importantly, 2 antidotes he always carried with him out of habit from military hospital days. The first was for barbiturate poisoning. The second was for anticholinergics, the same group of drugs to which scopolamine belonged. If his assumptions were correct, one of these antidotes would help Anna regain lucidity, at least temporarily. Victor checked the expiration dates, verified the integrity of the vials, and prepared everything he might need. Then he sat by the window and waited. At 1:45, he called a taxi and asked to be dropped 3 blocks from the mansion. He'd walk the rest of the way, staying in the shadows of trees and fences. The night was moonless, and the darkness concealed him better than any camouflage. The back door of the mansion was unlocked, as Sophia had promised. Victor slipped inside and froze, motionless, listening. Silence. Only the hum of a refrigerator somewhere in the kitchen and the hoarse snoring of a guard in the room by the front entrance. He moved down the service hallway he already knew, trying not to make the floorboards creak. The 2nd floor was even darker, but his eyes had already adjusted to the darkness. 3rd door on the right from the stairs, he remembered. The door wasn't locked with a key. Victor pushed it gently and entered. The room turned out to be large and almost empty. A bed against the wall, a nightstand, a window with drawn curtains, and Anna lying on the bed in an unnatural position, as if someone had thrown her there and forgotten. Victor approached and closed the door behind him. He walked to the bed. In the darkness, Anna's face seemed different, lifeless. He felt for her pulse on her neck, weak but regular. Then he took a small flashlight from his pocket and turned it on, shielding the light with his palm. Anna's pupils were dilated, almost not reacting to light. On her arms were marks of multiple injections, old and new. Her skin was pale, dry. Her lips were cracked. He examined the nightstand, a half-empty glass of water, pills in an unlabeled blister pack, a vial with a clear liquid, also unlabeled. Victor smelled the liquid and recognized the characteristic odor. His assumption was confirmed. He took out a syringe and the vial with the antidote. His hands didn't tremble, though he held his daughter's life with that grip. 30 years of practice had taught him to separate emotions from actions. Now he was a father. He was a surgeon. The injection took a few seconds. Now all that remained was to wait. Victor sat on the edge of the bed and took Anna's hand in his. Her hand was cold and inert, like a sleeping child's. He looked at her face and remembered her as a little girl. How she ran around the house. How she laughed. How she hugged him when he came home from work. He couldn't remember when she stopped hugging him. Didn't remember the exact moment when his daughter stopped wanting to be near him. When the warmth turned to polite distance. When love transformed into obligation. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Anna remained motionless. And suddenly, her eyelids moved. Her fingers weakly squeezed around his hand. Her lips parted. "Papa." Her voice was so hoarse he barely heard it. "Papa," she repeated. Victor leaned closer. "I'm here," he said. "I'm with you." Anna slowly opened her eyes. There was confusion, fear, and something more in them. Something resembling hope. "You're alive," she whispered, as if not believing what she saw with her own eyes. "He said you had died. He showed me the newspaper. I thought he was lying. I thought, I'm alive." Victor squeezed her hand harder. "I came for you." Anna tried to sit up, but her body didn't respond. She let her head fall back on the pillow, and tears ran down her cheeks. "I wanted to call you." Her voice was hoarse. "When everything started. But he took my phone. Said you didn't care. That you never wanted me. He showed me the newspaper, the obituary. And I believed him. I believed you had left me alone." "You are not alone." Victor felt tears burn his own eyes. "You were never alone. I'm here. I came for you. Do you hear me? We're leaving together." Anna looked at him, and in her eyes appeared a clarity she hadn't had a moment ago. The antidote was working. "He won't let you," she said. And her voice was no longer trembling. "He has guards, lawyers, connections. He told me he'd bury me, that I'd never go anywhere." "He's wrong," Victor responded. "Because now you have me, and I won't leave until you're free." Somewhere below, a door slammed. Footsteps were heard. Victor tensed, ready to act. The door to the room opened, and in the doorway appeared Sophia's face, panicked. "The guard change ended early," she whispered. "You have 3 minutes." Victor acted with the speed he was accustomed to in the operating room. When every second counted, he picked Anna up in his arms. She helped where she could. Her body was weak, almost weightless, but her eyes were looking at him consciously, and that gave hope. "Can you walk?" he asked in a whisper. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, and she almost fell. Victor caught her and understood he'd have to carry her. He wrapped his arm around her waist, threw her arm over his shoulder, and headed for the door. Sophia was waiting in the hallway, listening for sounds in the house. Somewhere below, guards were talking. Their voices were muffled. "Wait," she whispered, "until they pass." They waited until the voices died down. "Not the main stairs," Sophia whispered. "There's a service stairway at the end of the hallway. It leads to the kitchen and from there through the back door." They moved down the dark hallway, and Victor felt Anna trying to walk on her own, trying not to be a burden, though her legs barely obeyed her. The service stairway turned out to be narrow and steep. Going down it with an unconscious person in his arms was almost impossible. But Victor managed, holding the handrail with one hand and supporting Anna with the other. The kitchen was empty and dark. Sophia led them between the tables and refrigerators. There was the door leading to the courtyard. They were a few steps from freedom. And then the lights came on. Adrian stood by the wall, leaning against the doorframe with a glass of wine in his hand. He was wearing a home robe and looked relaxed, as if he'd been waiting. And not just now, but for a long time. Well, he said with a smile. How touching. Papa came for his daughter. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist, Victor. That's why I was waiting. He took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. Sophia. He turned to the maid. You disappoint me. After everything I've done for you, for your family. Sophia didn't answer. She just pressed against the wall, as if trying to disappear into it. Adrian pulled a phone from his robe pocket. One call, and you'll both go to prison. Breaking and entering. Attempted kidnapping of an incapacitated person. Assault. Anna will go to a closed psychiatric facility. I have all the necessary documents, medical reports, doctor signatures. The court will declare her incompetent, and you will be accused of breaking and entering and assault. My godfather is a Supreme Court judge. How do you think this will end for you? Anna isn't incapacitated. Victor took a step forward. She's being poisoned by you. With the same drugs you poisoned Marina and Olga with. Something flashed in Adrian's eyes, but he quickly recovered. Delirious imaginings of a sick woman, he said calmly. I have all the medical documents signed by the best specialists. And what do you have? The words of a senile old woman and the paranoia of a retired military doctor. I have Anna's blood analysis. Victor said it was a lie. But Adrian couldn't know that. Which I took 20 minutes ago. Tomorrow morning, it will be in an independent laboratory. Adrian froze with the phone in his hand. For the first time in the entire conversation, his confidence wavered. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wasn't as confident. Prove it. Show it to me. They looked at each other. The seconds stretched like hours. Then the kitchen door leading to the entrance burst open, and several people entered. But it wasn't security. The first was Gerardo, with a coat hastily thrown over his pajamas. Behind him, a man in a prosecutor's office uniform with a folder in his hands, and two plainclothes police officers who immediately spread out through the kitchen, blocking the exits. Adrian stared at his godfather with an expression of absolute incomprehension. Ignacio. His voice trembled for the first time. What does this mean? Gerardo didn't answer. He looked at Adrian as one looks at someone seen for the first time and who provokes nausea. The prosecutor stepped forward. Adrian Dominguez, we ask you to accompany us to give testimony regarding the death of your second wife, Olga Martinez. We have reason to believe her death was not suicide. This is absurd. Adrian raised his voice. There's no evidence. The case was closed 4 years ago. The case has been reopened. The prosecutor put the folder on the table. Based on new testimony and the results of a new expert examination. Additionally, we've received a request from the Swiss clinic where your first wife is interned. The doctors there expressed concern about the nature of her illness and request an independent examination. Adrian turned his gaze to Gerardo. It was you. After everything my father took you out of poverty. He gave you everything. Your father died 3 months ago. Gerardo responded in a low voice. And before he died, he told me the truth about Marina, about Olga, about everything he knew and hid. He was proud of it, Adrian. Proud of the monster he had raised. He shook his head. And I should have stopped it 20 years ago. I was carrying this burden, paying a debt to the man who saved my life, and I repaid it by handing your daughter to a monster. Today, I closed that circle. Adrian lunged for the back door, but one of the police officers was faster. A second later, he was face down on the kitchen table, his hands cuffed behind his back. I have a lawyer, he shouted. I have connections. You don't know who you've messed with. Your connections are very busy right now, the prosecutor said calmly, answering questions about their own participation in your affairs. Ignacio turned out to be a very informative interlocutor. They led Adrian toward the exit. At the door, he turned and looked at Anna, who remained standing, leaning on her father. And for the first time in a long time, she looked at her husband without fear. I'm sorry I didn't see it, she said. Her voice was weak, but firm. I'm going to file for divorce and testify about everything you did to me. About every pill. About every injection. About every day you stole from me. She took a step toward him, and Victor felt how much rage there was in this emaciated, nearly destroyed girl. You said I was your property, that I was the doormat you wiped your feet on. Now the doormat is you, and I'm stepping over you. She went to the door without looking back. Victor followed her, and the last thing he heard was Adrian's voice turning into a scream. This isn't over. Do you hear me? This isn't over. But it was the end. At least for him. Victor's meticulously planned rescue operation and the confrontation in the kitchen highlights several key psychological elements. Anna's initial drug-induced haze and Adrian's gaslighting attempts are directly countered by Victor's medical expertise and strategic deception, the fake blood sample. The arrival of Gerardo and the authorities, orchestrated through careful planning, represents the triumph of truth and accountability over Adrian's web of lies and influence. Adrian's breakdown, particularly his misplaced trust in Gerardo, illustrates the collapse of his carefully constructed narcissistic world. Anna's final defiant words are a powerful moment of reclaimed agency, signifying her psychological liberation from Adrian's control and the beginning of her healing journey. Gerardo remained by Victor's side, helping navigate the bureaucratic labyrinths completely unknown to a retired military surgeon. By morning, Anna was in a private hospital room, connected to an IV drip, eliminating the remains of poison from her system. Doctors said physically she'd recover in a few weeks. Psychologically, it would take longer, but they were optimistic, especially considering she was now safe and knew the truth. Victor sat by her bed, holding her hand. Outside, dawn was breaking, and the first rays of sun painted the hospital windows gold and warm. Papa, Anna opened her eyes. You're still here. I'm not going anywhere, he responded. Unless you kick me out yourself. She smiled weakly, but the smile faded quickly. I need to tell you something, she said in a low voice. Something I never told you. Not because you didn't care, but because I was afraid. Victor kept silent, giving her time to gather strength. She continued. You were just like him. Not so cruel, not so obvious, but the same. You controlled Mom every day of her life. You decided everything for her. What to eat, what to wear, who to be friends with. You called it care, but it was a prison. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. I grew up in that prison. I thought it was normal, that that's how families were, that the man should control, the woman should obey. When I met Adrian, he seemed familiar, safe. I recognized you in him, and I thought that was right. Anna let her hand drop, but her eyes didn't leave her father's face. When Mom died, I didn't cry. I didn't cry at the funeral. Everyone thought I was in shock. But the truth is, I was happy for her. Happy she was finally free. And I hated you for that. Hated you for what you did to her. What you taught me. Victor lowered his head. Every word fell on him like a hammer blow, and he accepted those blows because he deserved them. Everyone. You're right, he said finally. I found her diaries several years after the funeral. I read them all night and tried to understand what kind of monster I had been all those years. He raised his eyes to his daughter, full of tears. I can't change the past. I can't give back to your mother the years I took from her. I can't erase what I taught you, but I can acknowledge my guilt, and I can try to be a different person if you give me a chance. Anna looked at him in silence for a long time. In her eyes was pain accumulated over the years, and rage that found no outlet, and something else, something resembling a willingness to finally let go of hate. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally. Maybe I never can, but you came for me. You risked everything to save me. And you acknowledged what you did instead of justifying yourself. She squeezed his hand harder. It's not enough to erase the past, but it's enough to try building something new. Victor nodded, feeling like something warm spread in his chest. Not redemption, because some things can't be redeemed, but something close to peace, to acceptance, to the possibility of moving forward. Adrian was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murders of Olga and Marina. Evidence was found of systematic poisoning. Sofia received asylum and started a new life in safety. Gerardo found peace, having finally repaid his debt. Victor and Anna's relationship rebuilt slowly, not as father-daughter from before, but as two adults learning to trust again. She invited him to dinner at her small apartment. She had cooked. She had set the table. She had chosen the wine. When he entered, she hugged him. For the first time in many years, she hugged him truly, like people who love each other hug. "Thank you," she said, "for coming back then, for not giving up, for changing." Victor hugged her in response, and felt something warm spread in his chest. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a second chance." They had a long conversation that evening about the past that couldn't be changed, about the present they were building together, and about the future that for the first time in a long time didn't bring fear. When Victor was leaving, Anna stopped him at the threshold. "You know what I understood this year?" She said, "That forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a process. Every day you have to decide anew whether to hold on to the pain or let it go. And every day it gets a little easier." Victor nodded. "I learned that, too. And I'm grateful for every day you give me the opportunity to be better." He went out into the night and walked down the street toward his home. The city slept, but some windows were still lit. And behind each one was its own story, its own mistakes and victories, its own monsters and heroes. Victor didn't know if he'd turned into a hero. Probably not. But he knew for sure he had stopped being a monster. And that was more than enough. This poignant and complex narrative delves into the destructive cycle of control and the profound journey of self-awareness and reconciliation within a family. Victor's initial, unwitting contribution to Anna's vulnerability and his subsequent efforts to dismantle the patterns of abuse offer a powerful lesson in accountability and the courage to confront one's own past. Anna's poignant revelation that forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a process, underscores the enduring impact of deep emotional wounds and the continuous effort required to heal. How do we, as individuals and as a society, break cycles of control and manipulation within families, and what role does self-reflection play in transforming toxic dynamics into genuine, loving connections?